I've been invited to comment on Lisa Siraganian's arguments against viewpoint diversity and intellectual pluralism. The short of it is, I think her arguments are not convincing. I think if you look at them closely, you'll see that her main arguments actually show the need for viewpoint diversity. Second, I think her other arguments are straw men, arguments against irrelevant targets like flat earthers, not against viewpoint diversity. So I'm going to spend a few minutes elaborating those 2 points. First, she claims otherwise, but in fact, she doesn't reject viewpoint diversity. She embraces it. She says she wants good ideas to win and bad ideas to lose. But the question, of course, is, how can she know which ideas are good and which ideas are bad without comparing them? If you recognize the need to compare ideas to evaluate which are good and which are bad, that, of course, means you are, by definition, accepting the need for intellectual pluralism. And, of course, that's precisely what she does. She's in favor of just enough viewpoint diversity to include her viewpoint, because her viewpoint is right, and because conflicting viewpoints are wrong. Well, she might reply, some ideas are wrong. The idea that the sun revolves around the earth is a bad idea, so we don't teach it. And of course that's true, but we don't ban the idea. If you want to research it, it's out there. We consider it a bad viewpoint because we believe it's been refuted. It's been refuted by a better viewpoint. How would we know it's a bad viewpoint unless we could measure it against a good viewpoint? She mentions John Milton. Of course, that's exactly how Milton's bigoted view of Catholicism ultimately died out, isn't it? It died out the same way that prejudice against other subordinated groups has died out over the years by competing with better viewpoints. That did not happen in 17th century England because Milton's intolerance of Catholics was the universally accepted viewpoint. It was the double helix of the day. Catholics were regarded as political non-persons by just about everyone. They were seen to be under a malign foreign influence. All but a tiny minority of Englishmen were absolutely certain it was a good idea that free speech should not extend to Catholics. 17th century England put into practice Siraganian's aversion to viewpoint diversity. So when you think about viewpoint diversity, it's useful to focus on issues that are not as settled in the public mind as the double helix. Obviously, there are lots of such issues. Think of a few. Should X be behind bars? Should illegal immigrants be deported? Should affirmative action be permitted? How can we know whether these contestable ideas are good or bad without debating them, without hearing the arguments pro and con, without comparing them with conflicting viewpoints? Siraganian says she is opposed to partisan and political limits on speech, but actually she's not. She wants to advantage good political ideas, namely hers, and disadvantage bad political ideas, namely those that she disagrees with. And in doing that, she embraces the very partisanship she claims to reject. Just imagine the consequences of doing what she recommends. Do we really want the university to close itself off to political viewpoints that are held by half the country, to turn our faculty into a priesthood responsible for inculcating the deplorable masses with the one correct set of good political viewpoints? Of course, it would make perfect sense to do that if you think you're infallible. But If we're operating a university and not a madrasa, if we're engaged in a search for truth and not peddling propaganda, if we have a modicum of epistemic humility, we need to compare multiple viewpoints to figure out which one is right, which is precisely what she herself tries to do in arguing against viewpoint diversity. So that's my first point. She implicitly embraces the very viewpoint diversity that she purports to reject. My second point is that nearly every one of her arguments is directed at an irrelevant straw man that has nothing whatsoever to do with the substantive case for or against viewpoint diversity. Let me give you 3 examples. First, she argues that viewpoint diversity is used instrumentally to pursue some other value, like democracy. Well, so what? Yes, it's a means, a useful tool. Citizens in a modern, pluralistic society need skill in accommodating conflicting viewpoints. That's vital to a smooth functioning democracy. So why isn't that something universities should be teaching? Second, she argues it would be mistaken to adopt a quota system that requires hiring a given number of conservatives or dissenters to remedy groupthink, orthodoxy, and self-censorship. I agree with her. I think that's right. But let us not confuse the remedy with the illness. If you have mice in your house, it would be a bad idea to get rid of them by introducing rattlesnakes. But that doesn't mean you don't have mice. No, self-censorship exists on this campus and on other campuses. The evidence is incontrovertible. That a particular remedy would be unwise does not mean that there is no problem. Finally, she argues that some people support intellectual pluralism in bad faith. They're hypocrites. They're for viewpoint diversity to protect their views, but they're against viewpoint diversity if it means protecting views they dislike. Obviously, that's true. We see this sort of hypocrisy and bad faith everywhere in American public life today. Some members of Congress are against letting the president exercise the war powers of a king. Unless he's in their political party, then it's bombs away. Do what you like. Yes, they're hypocrites. But again, so what? That arguments for viewpoint diversity are made hypocritically is not an argument against viewpoint diversity. It's an argument against hypocrisy. And that argument against hypocrisy does not begin to address the substantive views of Mill or Milton or Holmes or the legions of thinkers through the centuries who understood that viewpoint diversity is essential for freedom of inquiry, and that freedom of inquiry is essential for human progress. Thank you.